So Those Who Wish Me Dead is a thriller that I imagine was probably sold on, like, I know it's based on a book, but I was probably sold on the basis of someone saying, look, here's the type of film we're gonna have. We're gonna have Angelina Jolie, and she's gonna be running from hitman in a forest. It's gonna be very intense. But he's like, it's okay, but needs something more. It's like, well, how about if the forest is on fire and she's running through it trying to kill hitmen? It's like, now we got a film. Because sure enough, that is pretty much the action highlight of this thriller that honestly is kind of by the numbers, but it has its moments here and there where you kind of dig it. So there are two stories at play here. First, you have Angelina Jolie playing Hannah, who's a former forest firefighter, something like that, who's basically, she still has nightmares about not being able to save everyone during a forest fire. And, is basically trying to come to terms with herself that she's basically going to have to work at a fire post where nothing will happen. So she basically tries to, she tries to connect with everyone, hide her feelings. She drinks a lot to mask the pain. And she's still haunted by the memories of losing a fellow coworker in a fire and losing a family in a fire. And if you miss these from the opening, if you go to see this in the theater and you miss that part, don't worry. They'll keep repeating these dreams over and over again. So you get the point that she's haunted. Now, at the same time, you have this kid named Connor, who's basically fleeing with his dad from some hitman. Now, Connor's father has uncovered some very delicate information about involving the government and embezzling money, since his dad is an accountant. And now some hitman want to basically shut him up by killing him. Now, we never figure out what specifically Connor's father knows or how he knows this. We just know that some hitman want him dead. And they do kill him, except his son Connor escapes. Connor's played by Finn Little. Now, Connor mostly just kind of fulfills like the innocent nature here of like the kid in danger trope. He doesn't really have that much personality here. He's supposed to cry when he feels like he's in danger. He's supposed to get angry when he feels like, strangers are coming after him. He doesn't really have much of an arc to him, and especially since he's not really trusted with the information either. Like Connor's father basically says, look, this truth has to get out, so I'm going to give you this piece of paper, but don't read it. Don't read anything about it. Just give it to the press. Don't worry about me, because I'm gonna get shot up. So the hitmen pursuing him are actually kind of interesting in that they're a father-son duo. They're Patrick and Jack. So Jack is played by I believe his name is Aidan. I always mispronounce it. Aidan Gillen. You might remember the guy from the opening scene in The Dark Knight Rises, who basically confronts Bane. And Patrick, his son, is played by Nicholas Hoult. And they're a father-son duo, and there's kind of an interesting dynamic here that's not really explored. Like, you have Connor connecting with his father, and there's this whole play about, like, the sins of the father, where Jack is basically a relentless killer. He hates the Midwest. He hates this job. He hates the people out there. And Patrick just kind of looks on with just kind of this, like, contemplative nature about, am I really doing the right thing? Do I have to take over what my dad's doing here? It feels like it for the first act of the film, but then in the second act, just kind of Nicholas Hoult just becomes like a complete villain by the end, which is kind of disappointing. I mean, it's kind of interesting to see Hoult play that kind of role. It just feels like he has to step into it too quickly into this film. It feels like they were building up to a much different character, but it just didn't come out of that, especially since they don't play off the father-son dynamic, which is a big wasted opportunity here. So Connor basically, you can pretty much fill in the blank with what happens with the story here. Connor hooks up with Hannah, and she tries to escort the boy to safety, away from the hitman, while also trying to target the hitman. Now, the big scene stealers of this film, however, is a couple who, the couple's like a sheriff and his pregnant wife. And the couple is played by Joe Bernthal, once more stuck into an action-heavy role, and Medina Singhor playing Allison, his pregnant wife. And they live out in the range. They live a very quiet life. But I love the fact that these two characters, they pose them as people who have been in this situation before. Like Joe Bernthal plays Ethan the sheriff. Both Ethan and Allison act as though they've been in another thriller. So they know what's going on with these hitmen. They can read them like a book. They know how to get the upper hand on them. They know the telltale signs of what to say on the phone when they're being held hostage. They know the logistics of being held hostage. So any scene with them, I absolutely loved. And especially because, I have to mention this, the one thing that this film has that I've never seen in any film is that, okay, so Allison is pregnant. So she's a pregnant black woman who's being hunted by hitmen, and she goes after them on horseback with a hunting rifle. I can't honestly say I've never seen a film where a pregnant black woman with a hunting rifle on a horse going after hitmen. I've never seen that in a film, and just to see that in a film I thought was great on its own, especially since they steal the show here. I mean, Ethan and Allison both have moments where they get to fight back against the hitman. They get the best punchlines, the best kills. Not to say that Hannah doesn't, that Angelina Jolie doesn't get her moments, but Angelina Jolie, it feels like she's in a much different film. It feels like, Ethan and Allison are in like a sequel thriller, like they've been through this whole ordeal before, whereas Hannah feels like she's in a bruised arm action film. Now, for those who don't know, bruised arm action films are, like a classic example is Die Hard. Basically, you have a film where you have a hero who basically takes more damage the further they go, and you question whether or not they're going to make it out alive. And Hannah has that happen to her a lot, like before the hitmen even get to her. Like she's a bit of a drunken mess, so she does get into some accidents, but once a storm comes by her tower and threatens her, she falls out of the tower, she busts up her hand. When the hitmen come after her, she starts taking on more injuries. She gets shot at a bunch of times. I believe she gets stabbed at several points, and she just becomes like a bloody mess by the end of the film. So there are some interesting action scenes here. Like the dialogue is pretty simple though, and like a lot of the familiar tropes are here where they don't really like fill in the blanks of the template. They just say, look, there's delicate information. They're gonna kill a kid. That's all you really need to know. We just want to get to the big forest fire climax here where Angelina Jolie and Nicholas Hoult duke it out with each other with knives and guns in a forest that's ablaze, and that stuff is cool, but it's like the path that they get there is not as interesting, with the exception of Joe Bernthal and Medina Senghor basically going after these hitmen in their own little film where they basically steal the movie from everyone else. Like this film, it's been so little time explaining this stuff, and I kind of admire that because honestly, do I really care what Connor's dad knows? Does it relate to anything else in the story of survival? Not really, so I don't really see why we have to spend so much time with it. We spend so little time with that the big boss who's orchestrating all this is played by Tyler Perry, and Tyler Perry only shows up for one scene. He shows up, he says, "Do your job," and then leaves. Like midway through the film. That's all he does. And then the whole film throughout is basically just, hitmen going into the small town. They cover up their tracks, they try to kill everyone, they try to deceive people, and they take hostages. Basic thriller stuff. So, like, the only really big merits that this film has is that it has a handful of, great action sequences. Although, it shifts around with, the characters, where you're not sure, is this Bernthal's film, or is this Jolie's film? Because it feels a lot like Bernthal plays a much bigger role in this film. Despite Hannah having, a bigger arc to get over in this film. So, it has its moments of great intensity, some great action sequences, but I mean, if you're hoping for something that's going to change up the thriller template here, nothing really all that original here. But for what it is, for just being just a gritty, bruised arm thriller, it mostly gets the job done. And on that level, I think it's a fine film. There's not a whole lot that's going to be memorable here, where you're not going to look at it as anything more as it's the Angelina Jolie forest fire movie where she fought Nicholas Hoult. That's about the only big things that are memorable about it, considering that it squanders some opportunities for the father-son dynamic, and maybe there's another story in here about the class differences, maybe a little bit with that, but it's not as explored here. It's mostly just the typical bruised arm thriller, and on that basis, it's all right.